resisting against, maybe bad governance, or resisting against the abuse of the rule of law. Perhaps besides looking at the perspectives, I also look at the importance of partnerships, because when you look at that track by Juliani Machozi Ajana, you realize that there was an intended, perhaps, a collaboration or partnership towards producing that particular track that was speaking to a particular case of standing against or resisting against extrajudicial killings in the country, or even enforced disappearances. And such a song would perhaps bring to the attention of people of interest who are concerned about the state of maybe the extrajudicial killings happening in the country and elsewhere in the international system, and perhaps the need for us to relook at the existing frameworks and see whether such frameworks are being implemented to the letter to ensure that such extrajudicial killings do not happen. I would look at it, for instance, the way it speaks about the need for those who carry out such extrajudicial killings facing justice in our courts of law. The message deep into that song communicates on the need for resistance against extrajudicial killings, whether it's happening here in the country or elsewhere in the international system. I would also mention the need, I don't know whether this project, as mentioned, would get deep into scholarship. I would also wish to see in the review of the work, perhaps, how the songs are translating to scholarship. There are several scholars who try to interrogate music, the place of music in nonviolent resistance in the country. And how do we, after we perhaps map out these many songs, how do we package that information to the extent that that information is shared to young scholars in high schools or even in universities, so that in the near future then the emerging young scholars who have already would find that knowledge already existing somewhere packaged, so that they'll be able to access it courtesy of the project that the team is doing. I would perhaps mention one book titled Ripples of Hope. If you're interested in reviewing nonviolent resistance in Kenya, it may help the team that is working on the projects. It's done by someone called Robert Cress, which may be of interest to the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mwema. I love that last point. I think, and in many ways, I think that was the essence of what we were aiming for. Even when putting together this project, it's how do we create a collective archive, a collective memory of this whole season, and especially our landmark cultural moments. I think it was important to just bring that together, but for sure, I love the ambition even of bringing it into the scholarly side. So I'm gonna give the floor to one more speaker before I bring back Nonini, who has, I know he has more things to say, but he also has a fun surprise for us. So I'm going to give the floor to Abdi.
Thank you. I'm joining you from the diaspora, and thank you again. It's a good conversation to have. I'm not a musician, but let me acknowledge the powerful tradition of protest songs and music in Kenya, which has always been the voice for the voiceless and a call for justice and change. Historically, I would say protest songs in Kenya have been significant for the fight of independence to our ongoing struggle for democracy and social justice. Iconic songs and artists have used music to challenge the oppression and inspire action and change. All ground. This is my view, and fostering solidarity and collective purpose so that we can. So many say, Angukanai, all this is a good idea to have, but this protest song articulate our frustrations, aspirations, providing a powerful platform to express dissent and demand accountability. And the emotional part of the music in protest helps sustain the spirits of Kenyan movement, even in adversity. Personal stories, I saw personal stories from protesters, how these songs inspire and empower us to take action. Mine is only to say, let's protect the freedom of expression, especially for artists and musicians in the social movement. My final take is, let's continue music as a tool for resistance. Artists, activists should keep creating and sharing songs that challenge injustice and inspire change. We will amplify these voices through social media, community events, and demonstration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdi. Happy to hear you're listening from the diaspora as well.
Actually from Toronto in Canada. Thank you.
Fantastic. Salimiana sana huko in Kenyan fashion.
Asante.
Mr. Ngatia, thank you for answering our call. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. And thank you for the shout out. Mimi niko tu hapa Kiambu.
You don't get to be humble anymore. Not after what you've been up to.
Thank you. And it's an honor to be in this space with a lot of people who've inspired the work that I do, that we do, and whose music we've also incorporated in the stories we tell. Specifically, the show we just did, there was and Bogabo somewhere in there. Daima was in there, and so I want to speak on something of on another side of the music. And well, this is sounds of freedom. So at some point I was like any missing musician, but poems and stories are still sounds. So on 2 occasions, noticed that it's not just protest, it's not just driving the anger and the call for revolution, but it's also comforting music. Just when we're in situations where we don't know what to say, we don't have words for the moment yet. And I'll point out 2. On the day that the police shot our comrades right outside Parliament, I happened to be on across town on another side, and almost spontaneously in that space, everyone started singing Daima. Because in that moment, it's the one emotional language that we could speak, and I think it makes so much sense now that Dan has put the Dages thing into context. So there was that, and it also connects with what we had in the show. Spoiler alert, Kamodo John your show so far, Pole Aki. But Tom Bonner dies. And after he dies, there's a funeral, and we're doing something a bit anachronistic, and we're putting Daima in that space, and it allows for such necessary emotional release at that point. And it gets me every time. The other instance was I was fortunate enough to use my taxis on the first day of the protest. I was a guest of the state, and as we were being booked into Kamukunji, there were at least 50 other people in the police station who'd just been arrested and transferred there. And we found them being bullied by the police officers, but they were singing Utawala back in a situation where it's almost past resistance. You've been picked from the streets, you've been ferried to the police station, you've been booked into the cell. However, in that moment, you're still pushing back with Utawala, and I found that to be quite moving.
Amazing.
And all this has also been encapsulated in the concerts that came after, when we were all grieving and couldn't really understand what had just happened. And we had the Mashuja concert at Uhuru Park, the one Kina Willie Oeba and Susan held in Nakuru. And it's such a moment to just come back together and release all the emotion that we are holding on to, that we don't know where to place. And I find we label all this music and this art and all this, we label it protest, but it's also turns into comfort art. And I thought I'd speak on that. Dan also mentioned something which I'll touch on and connect to something that Willie Weber is doing before I drop the mic, which is how music would travel after it had been suppressed during Moi's regime. And as poets, we don't get as much airplay on radio and all that. And I've been watching Willie Weber going into matatus in Nairobi, in Nakuru, everywhere, and performing there, not waiting to do gigs for people to come in. And I find that mind-blowing and very encouraging. So Zidi sana, Will, and any other poet that's listening. Asante sana.
Thank you. And yeah, more power for sure to guys who just create their own platforms. So I will give the mic, I think, as our last speaker, to Vivian, if you are with us.
Hello, yes, I am here.
Awesome. Karibu sana.
Asante. So I'm Vivian Wamboi, a singer, done quite a number of Afropop Kenyan songs. And I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation. And I think listening to a lot of the creatives who shared, I also would like to chime into some of the sentiments. Number one, I think even if you're not a creative, I think music is more like an interactive space. And the interaction is actually what makes the music, right? So their voices and their input is extremely welcome and needed. Other than that, I will say that I'm currently not in Kenya for now, for a couple of months. And maybe I'm on exile, but I really feel like a lot of the conversations also need to cater for the inclusivity of the women's contribution, especially women who create. I have had these conversations with other people who say, if you are creative, you are creative. But that's not true, because even our functionality as men and women is different. Other than being a singer, I'm also a psychologist and an author as well. And of course, this now kind of expands my thinking to the revolution that's happening. I think we also need to address the kind of like the self-awareness and the healing that's needed, and that kind of music as well, because even after a long day of fighting, mtu anahitaji aingize miguu kwa karai, unajua, a relax. And I think that also needs to be catered for. So that's also just something I wanted to put out there, because we need the collective voices, and I think that's what even this conversation here speaks into. I will also add that there's a huge group of artists in the diaspora. I'm currently in the US, and I think even for someone like Nonini, I know he's around here somewhere. We haven't met yet, but we do talk once in a while. And I feel like there's also an additional responsibility. And I know there are people who say, if you're not on the ground, maybe you're not for it. But that's not true. The reality is, in fact, some of us are probably more passionate because we fought the good fight when it comes to the oppressive systems. Willie was talking about the fact that music for social change does not pay. But any artist can say music in Kenya is just a long shot. We've danced with Kekobo and the MSSK and all these things. And definitely those are things that are at the moment not really feasible, and artists are trying to come up with also creative ways of trying to get their music heard. And I know there's radio and all these things, but I feel like even at the heart of this revolution is the distribution. And maybe it now alludes to the other people who absorb the music. The musician should not be the last person to be paid, right? Because they produce the work. So it's very important for them to be honored, right? So there's a lot more I can keep on saying, but it's important to understand that the women's voices are equally important. We bring a lot of